Alright guys, sorry I'm getting here a little bit late. We had a little technical difficulty. So, who all's out there? Who we got joining us? Alright, we'll let people get on because I'm getting on here a little late. Sorry about that. You guys got your drinks and your cigars. Alright. This may be a little bit of a bumpy ride tonight, guys and gals. We had we had some difficulties. Hey Mike, Betsy, Charlie, Bill, how we doing? Don't mind me, I'm just gonna light up.
Stop smoking.
Alright guys, gals. Just a few housekeeping things. We kind of clear up some confusion. Obviously today is not Sunday, today is Monday. I'm going live on Monday instead of Sunday because it's holiday weekend. And Pitdaddy Cigar Sundays on Sunday evenings have always been intended to kind of wrap up the weekend, you know, so we can talk about what you might have been cooking, answer some questions, and go from there. So on holiday weekends, I think we're going to be doing it on, you know, that Monday or, you know, the day that, well, you get it. The day that would be your new Sunday. So that's why we're here Monday evening at 6 instead of Sunday at evening, because it's a holiday weekend. So this is day before everybody goes back. So that's where we are with that. All right. Everybody doing good? You got your there we go. Hopefully you got a drink, you got a cigar or a celery stick or something to participate in these good times with. But we're going to get started. And we got a few topics for today. None of which are my camera skills. All right. Here we go. So today what I really want to talk to people about, you know, last week was all about ribs. We talked about all the different kinds of ribs. We talked about all kinds of misnomers about the cuts and terms and everything. So I brought my piggy this time because we're sitting down here in the office. And today we're going to be talking about pork shoulder. Pork shoulders and butts specifically, because a lot of people get really confused as to what's what and who's who. So I figured we'll just start from there and we'll see what happens. Okay, so first things first. What's the difference? Okay, so if I got piggy here, okay, I got at the top here starts the shoulder. And right through here, this top part is considered the Boston butt. And then down here, from basically right above here to here, is typically called a shoulder roast, or more specifically a picnic ham. A lot of people, have you seen picnic ham? It's actually this lower section here, just below what we know as the Boston butt up here, okay? And then, of course, hams actually come from back here. So butts come from shoulders, hams come from butts. Yeah, not clear as mud, right? But in all seriousness, so this Boston butt that we know, does anybody know what a Boston butt, how it got its name? Anybody know where that comes from? No? Alright. Boston butt gets its name not from its location, but from a barrel. So, 200 years ago, 300, 250, 220 years ago, Boston, they used to cut up the butts and they stored them in the barrel was called a butt barrel. Okay, and that was the name of the barrel, and thusly these tough pieces of meat that require more cooking and more breakdown that were stored in there became known as Boston butts, because you would buy a barrel of the meat or a Boston butt of the meat, so those roasts that came in there became known as Boston butts. Now, for those of you that don't know, I hear a lot of people calling this part the shoulder, and it can get really confusing because when you use whole shoulder, it's actually the Boston butt and the picnic ham together. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that. So we got the Boston butt up here, the picnic ham together. Those are called whole shoulders. Separate, this piece down here is typically called a picnic ham, and then you've got some shanks down here. So those of you that are competition folks, you'll know what a money muscle is, right? It's named that because of all the money it's won for people, and it runs along the top part of the butt here. Well, I've had people in the past ask me about pork collars. They'll see no collars in KCBS rules and stuff, and people always ask, well, what is that? So I wanted to go over that today. So the collar muscle is actually part of the money muscle. The money muscle is a segment that comes out with the Boston butt cut, but basically that pork collar and neck muscle, it connects the jowl right here through to the loin. Okay, that muscle goes all the way through. A lot of times you will see these peeled off and called pork fillets. Okay. Hi, Carolyn. Glad you could join us. We got Mike, Rebecca, Danny, Mr. Montgomery. Always a pleasure. Tim, Brent, nice to see you. Nick joining us. But yeah, so just as a recap, so this is my hog here. The pork collar muscle runs from right here, the jowl. It connects the jowl back to the loin. Okay, and it runs right through here. And the segment that's cut out for the Boston butt that we know as the money muscle is actually part of that. So when you hear people say, and you read the rules in KCBS and it says no pork collar muscles, that's why, because that's literally just the pre or post part of that money muscle, because that money muscle is actually part of the collar, And in some butchers, they take that money muscle off. It's called a pork fillet. And you can buy those just as that. For those of you that are into salumi and cured meats, the money muscle as a whole, when it's part of that pork collar muscle or that pork fillet, that muscle is typically harvested from the animal and it's used as copa. So all of you guys and gals that love copa salumis, that is literally a fully intact money muscle with the end that connects to the jowl and the end that connects to the loin on there. And I realize now my camera's really small because I'm using my cell phone tonight, guys, because the computer just would not fire up. So I'm going to have to keep it in tight for all the hand talking. But so that's what we're talking about right now. We're talking about the shoulders, the different pieces of those. So there's a lot to learn there. There's a lot to know. How can you tell the difference when you're at the grocery store? Somebody posted a cut earlier this week that was rib tips. They were asking what it was. It was, had some funky name on it. And as we're transitioning to new meat cut names, I think there's going to be a lot of confusion about things. You'll notice if you were a big beef eater, the industry is actually moving over to the more classic beef cut names for a lot of the pork cuts. But not everyone's transitioned and not everyone's following the guidelines, so it makes it really confusing sometimes. So, some simple stuff to keep in mind. If you're looking at a roast that's between 6 and 10 pounds, whether it's bone in or boneless, off of pork, it's usually a pork butt or a Boston butt. If you're looking at a bone-in roast that's about that size, maybe even up to 11 or 12 pounds, that's going to be a picnic ham, okay? Because if you're getting an actual ham from the hog, they're going to keep that more intact from the hindquarter. And that ham on a hog that goes to market, and typically hogs are going to market to be processed like that at around 300 pounds. If you're following any of the meat shortage and the processing issues right now, you'll see that there are a lot of 300-pound hogs for sale. And I've had people ask me, well, why are people selling these hogs? Why are the farmers selling these hogs at such a low cost? I mean, why don't they just feed them until it opens back up? And, here's one of those little snippets of information that you may not know. The equipment, because when they process animals, it's not done like it was in the old days. There's not just some dude with a knife and a 22. They have a lot of equipment in place. They have a whole, it's just like a manufacturing line when they process animals. So most processing lines are designed for a hog no bigger than 350 pounds, okay? So if that animal is bigger than 350 pounds, it won't go through the hog processing line. So that's why you're seeing all these hog farmers trying to unload these 300-pound hogs, because if they continue to feed them and hold on to them, they can't get anything back because they can't send them to the big processors. Those are things that are going to have to be hand processed at a small or a local processor, and the local processors are booked way out. I called around a few local small processors I knew in Illinois, just because I came across some spectacular deals on hogs and beef and cattle, and most of them are booked into the end of June, 1st of July. So unless you know how to do it yourself, which I do, and I can, it's going to be difficult. I was looking at processors because, usually you take it in there, it takes a few days, maybe a week, and that give me some time to order a extra deep freeze or two, because you can't buy a deep freeze anywhere right now. But they don't have it, so I'll have to wait till my deep freeze gets here, and then we'll go pick up some animals to harvest ourselves. However, back to our conversation. So, pork shoulders. Whole shoulder is going to weigh somewhere between 16 and 22 pounds. Boston butt, if you're looking at it, whether it's bone-in or boneless, you're looking at 6 to 10 pounds. Picnic ham, you're looking at, 8 or 9 pounds on the small end, up to about 12 pounds, 13 pounds on the big end. And it almost always is going to have the bone in. And then you can get the pork shanks. And depending on whether or not the processor sells pig's feet, will depend on what kind of shanks you get. If they sell pig's feet, you're not going to get shanks from that hog, okay? Because they're going to cut those pig's feet off high, and you're going to get right into the picnic ham. If they don't sell pig's feet, then they're probably going to cut down narrow, closer to the toes, and you're going to have some nice shank there. Why do I bring this up? Well, Because I like to cook with the whole animal. If you buy a hog, you're only getting, you know, 2 slabs of babies, 2 slabs of St. Louis, you know, 2 strips of rib tips, and you're going to cut the belly into two. You're going to get 2 shoulders, 2 hams, 2 loins, 2 tenderloins. And then depending on how you process some of that down, you can get a lot of extra meals out of that. So that's really where I'm going with this. Other than competition, where they want to see that skin collar around that foreshank or that top part, the lower part of the shoulder where you start getting into the elbow, so to speak. Other than that, there's not really a reason to keep the shank on the shoulder. So when I'm cooking for myself or for friends, I typically cut that off. I do a quick trim. I don't trim much on my shoulders. Depending on if it's for myself, if it's competition, I remove all the skin except for the collar on the shank. If I'm cooking for home, I don't. I actually leave the skin on. I'll square it up a little bit, and then I can season everything else. I can trim around and season the rest of it, so I'm not worried about getting bark or plenty of seasoning on there. But I actually like the skin, so I actually cook a whole shoulder with the skin on, skin side down. Basically because it helps me form a vessel underneath that, because that skin hardens up, and as stuff renders through it and the juices go to drip, they hit that skin and they steam up back through it. So it really creates super juicy, super tender, really flavorful meat. And as I mentioned, I typically either take, one of my big breaking knives and a handsaw, or, if I got it out and I'm ready, I've got a Sawzall that I bought. That's for processing meat only, that's important. I see a lot of people with the Sawzalls because they see us using them in competition stuff. And I just want to make sure y'all know we're not like tearing the deck down one weekend and then the next weekend, wiping it off and cutting up a hog. At least I can't speak for everyone, but me and my team aren't. We buy equipment when we cross-utilize equipment that could be construction equipment. For culinary equipment, we buy equipment specifically for the culinary use, and don't go back and forth. So when you see us pull out a Sawzall or a reciprocal saw and use it on meat, that's all it's ever been used on. And then, we remove the blade, we clean the equipment, we sanitize it with food safe sanitizer and all that. And I mention that because it's really important. Because a lot of times you see videos and photos of people doing things and there's no explanation to it, so you're left to fill in the blanks. And that's what Cigar Sundays are. We're filling in the blanks for people. So yeah, I trim that shank off, and I'll throw it on the smoker and season it up, and then I put it to the side. I typically don't pull the shanks. I leave them whole. I also don't take them all the way to done. I usually take them until, the internal temperature is about 150, 160. And I usually pull the shanks just before they hit the stall. And then I cool it down, and typically after I cool it down, vac bag it and then freeze it. And the reason I do that is twofold. One, cooling it down and vacuum bagging it will actually cause that smoke to penetrate deeper. It'll kind of it'll balance in there. It will equalize within the meat. And then I freeze it and I pull it out so that when I'm doing a soup or a stew or some greens or something, I've got my own shanks there that I can throw in the pot, and I can get those awesome dark pieces of really good smoked meat off there, get that smoke flavor. I've got a little bit of the bone for the flavor off the bone, and then I've got that skin all the way around that shank. And that skin is really going to cook down. If you're making greens or a soup, I always put that in first because I want that skin to break down, because it's going to break down to almost gelatinous like material. But you can get all the flavor out of that, all that smoke flavor, all that good subcutaneous fat, all that stuff's going to be fantastic. And then as you cook it long enough, and it breaks down, then I typically spoon it out and I'll rough chop it really good and typically give it a quick saute or a fry in the frying pan, and I'll use that as a garnish. So like if I'm making a nice little pork stew, I'll use that, cut up a little fresh herbs, maybe some sour cream, you know, and then a little bit of that, sauteed fried pig skin, it's not quite cracklings, it's a little different, but it's fantastic. Why do I mention all that? Well, because so often I see us as barbecue folks picking out these prime, perfect cuts, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I don't want us to forget where the heritage of barbecue came from. It came from people figuring out a way to use a cut that wasn't necessarily fantastic, that wasn't easy to cook, that wasn't sought after, but it worked well on their timeline. So that's kind of where I think we got to remember we come from. Let me relight this thing, take a couple puffs, and we'll get talking some more about some shoulder. All right. So, a couple things about shoulders. Just a couple more things. Whole shoulders, especially because they're so big, I typically recommend, if you're going to cook those, that you pre-salt those and you use some rubs that aren't high in salt so that you can pre-salt that shoulder ahead of time. Because if you pre-salt it, it's going to pull the flavor in. It's going to take the smoke in a lot more. Because when you cook a whole shoulder, you got to do everything you can, get all the flavor you can in there. Because the surface area to internal, meat area is out of proportion. There's a whole lot more internal meat volume than there is surface area on a whole shoulder. That's typically why, when you hear people say things about it, a pork shoulder being delicately seasoned, lightly seasoned, more porky, etc., etc., it's not because of some mystical property that you get by leaving it whole. It's because that outside rub method that everyone uses doesn't go as far, because when you're cooking a whole shoulder, you're in the 16 to 24 pound range, and that rub that you can get on the outside, it's hard to get it thick enough to really permeate that meat. The other thing is, it's hard to get that smoke ring in and enough smoke flavor on that pork shoulder, with traditional cooking methods, without getting any of the acrid or the bitter smoke. So that's why, for me, two big important things when you're cooking whole shoulders is, one, pre-salt the shoulder. You want to pre-salt it because the salt helps break down the meat, helps tenderize it, helps pull the moisture out of the cells, and then it's going to pull moisture back in. So you salt that and sweat the meat. Then when you put your rub on, the rub binds with that and it pulls it back in, so you get some flavor back in there. But wet traps smoke. Smoke is attracted to wet. Okay? If you don't believe me, you can try this for yourself. You can take 2 arms of the campfire and spritz one of them throughout the evening, and you'll notice that the one that you spritzed is going to have stuff on it, because it attracts the particles, it attracts that, where the dry one isn't going to. But so, 2 big things: pre-salt your shoulders and spritz. There's not a lot of cooking I do, barbecuing, that I do spritz, because a lot of it I don't think needs it. But a whole shoulder is one of those cuts that absolutely needs to be spritzed. So it can be spritzed with straight water. If you're doing straight water, I always tell people, if you can avoid it, don't use the tap water, because there's chlorine and other things in tap water that act differently in the cooking process. Because this isn't about boiling something this is something you're actually putting on there. So I typically use distilled water, or like Smart Water is really pH neutral water. But I typically use one of those if I'm spritzing straight water. Now, people will tell you to spritz with beer, spritz with soda, spritz with juice. You can certainly spritz with all those things. Just keep in mind, when you're spritzing with those, you're not only dampening or wetting the meat, you're also adding flavor and, more importantly, sugars. Okay? So, especially with juice and sodas, the sugar content on those are really high. So you got to be careful about that, because all those extra sugars in there have to go somewhere. They also have to burn up. So you may create a very molassesy, very thick, very caramel-like texture on parts of the pig or on parts of the shoulder. If that's what you're looking for, that's fine. Another very popular spritz, and one that I do like to use, is vinegar. The vinegar cuts through the fat on there. It sits nicely. I like the tang it adds. I think the tang of vinegar and pork fat were made for each other. My favorite way to eat pork is just really well seasoned pork, and you take the bottle and your thumb over it, and you sprinkle a little cider vinegar on it, or even rice wine vinegar. And I think it's fantastic. So, just one quick flash. Sorry, we had to adjust the camera. But, so vinegar is a great spritz on there. But if you spritz and salt your shoulder, you're going to get a lot more smoke penetration. You're going to get a lot more smoke flavor, and you don't have to worry as much about the acrid smoke. The other thing I suggest is wrapping shoulders. I very rarely wrap anything else in the cooking process, but I do wrap shoulders. I typically don't wrap with any liquid if I'm not doing it for competition. If I'm just doing it for home, I basically do a dry wrap. It's just basically a quick re-rub and a wrap. And I do that because I'm going to steam that pork, basically, because you're foil wrapping it, so you're not smoking it anymore, and you're not baking it. You're basically going to steam it in its own juices. And as it becomes juicier, then it switches to a braise. But why is all this important? Because that wrap shoulder, where I've just misted it lightly, re-rubbed it, put it in foil, so there's no liquid or anything like that, as it forces the moisture out of the meat, it's going to combine with those rubs. It's also going to combine with that smoke that we've layered on there, and it's going to continue to cook, and it's going to soak it up. Okay? So then when that shoulder's getting close to done, and keep in mind, you're talking about a 20-pound piece of meat, so there's going to be a lot of carryover here, rest it. And when you rest it, all those fluids are going to come back in there, all those flavors are going to get sucked in, and you're going to have a very delicious pork shoulder. It's going to have plenty of smoke, it's going to have lots of flavor, it's going to have tons of porky texture, and it's going to be really rich. That's why I leave that skin on, because I get to save all that subcutaneous fat that you may lose when you're removing that skin. So again, my method, whole shoulder, non-comp whole shoulder, leave the skin on, season everything else, smoke it until I smoke the color, because I can tell by the color. When the color starts changing, that's when things are going on, both with the smoke and the rub, that I want to stop, because my sugars and salts and spices are reacting to the heat and smoke. So that's at the point at which I decide to wrap. When I wrap, I spritz. Typically, I'm just spritzing with a little water, cider vinegar cut, usually about 50-50, and then I re-rub. Wrap it in foil, put it back on, skin side down, finish it off. I like to take my pork up over 200, 195 to 200. So typically I'll pull it off at about 190, 193, somewhere in there. wrap it with a towel, put it in a cooler, and let it sit for 2 hours. I love to rest whole shoulders. To me, there's nothing that eats better, tastes better than a well-rested, well-smoked pork shoulder. It just is greater than the sum of its parts. So after you've rested for 2 hours, get a foil hotel pan, a regular hotel pan. I unwrap over the hotel pan because I want to save all that liquid. Alright? If you've done what you need to correctly, you can turn that over meat side down in that pan. You can peel the skin off, pull the bones out. You can either use one of your tools, you can use your hands, you can use the bones, you can use a knife, but you can just chop what's in there, pull what's in there, and let it sit in that juice. And to me, that juice is fantastic. And if you want to sauce it, you can, but to me, I pull it right out of that juice, put it on a bun, put a little vinegar over the top of it, and maybe some coleslaw. And to me, that's the best pork sandwich you're going to get. Now, I've been talking for a while. What are y'all cooking? How was your Memorial Day? Nick, let's see. You just pulled off some prime sirloin caps with mood and double down. Sounds like a great time. Steven, smoked jowls are amazing, and so are the cheeks. Both those are good. In the pork, the jowl is the lower section here, and the cheeks the upper section. For those of you that roast whole hogs or are thinking about it, I'll tell you right now, the cheeks and the tongue are my two go-to pieces of meat when we roast a whole hog. If we've done it right, I can come in with a bouillon spoon and pull that cheek muscle out in one swipe, and usually make a little taco, or if I got a little piece of bread, and some vinegar, I'll make the best sandwich ever. And then pork tongue is fantastic, especially off a whole hog that you've been smoking. You go back there, pull that tongue out, slice it up, everything but the last tip of it, about that last little bit there, I discard because at that point it's dried out and tough. But the rest of it I slice up, and my favorite thing is to have people try it, and I don't tell them what it is. I just tell them, trust me. They trust me, they try it, they love it. Then I tell them what it is, and then they can't imagine that they just did what they did. But sometimes that's what you gotta do. Alright, so who we got? Alex. Alex did a chuck roast on the Kamada. So we had a little joke. We did some videos for some chuck roast cooks. We did some Wagyu chuck roasts. We called them Charles Eyes, or Charles roasts. Because, if it's Wagyu, it's high class. So it can't be Chuck, it's got to be Charles, right? Let's see. William, we didn't get crazy. Grilled some hot dogs. Your wife and your you know what? Hot dogs can be fantastic. We did a fantastic video doing some Wagyu beef hot dogs. But even if they're just good old 99-cent grocery store, bargain bin hot dogs, William, sometimes hot dogs are just what the doctor ordered. Especially, my favorite thing with hot dogs is I typically, when I have a long cook and I know I'm doing like an overnight cook or an all-day cook or something like that, and we're not going to eat, it's a bunch of big cuts, we're not going to eat till later, I like to grab a pack of hot dogs and I throw the hot dogs on the smoker, and as we get hungry, we just grab a couple hot dogs off here and there, because a smoked hot dog is dynamite. You thought hot dogs were good, smoke those suckers until they just get ready to split. And if you got natural casing, it's going to swell up, and that end of the casing is going to churn up just a little bit, and that's when they're done. And if you get the skinless dogs, they're going to split right down that seam. I'm not looking to rip it open. I just want to start splitting, and I know that I've got the perfect smoke on that hot dog. And they're phenomenal. Let's see. Brent, you did the Cure and Dirty Gringo on pulled pork enchiladas. Hot damn, that sounds good. Mike did ribs with the cure. You are right, sir. Though that ribs with the cure is the bomb. That's my go-to. Like that to me is one of my favorite things to eat. Is just good old classic ribs with the cure. Takes me back in time. Sprinkle a little bit of cider vinegar that's been infused, either with some fresh apples. You know, one of the things I love to do is take just a little bit of applesauce, like a tablespoon of applesauce. Put it in a 16-ounce jar. Put in about a teaspoon crushed red pepper flakes, and put in 2 or 3 cloves of garlic crushed. Fill it with cider vinegar and let that sit for a couple days in the refrigerator, and then use that to sprinkle on ribs and pork, and it's dynamite. Alright, Caroline, you know, I'm in Chicago, so it's definitely no ketchup on a dog here, but you know what? Every now and then you gotta break the rules, you know, so I will say I have partaken in a ketchup horseradish sriracha hot dog, and it was delicious. I hope they don't pull my Chicago card for that. Steve, Mr. Wanamaker's, how you doing, man? Happy Memorial Day. Hope you guys had some good festivities out there. I know you didn't get the best weather for it, but I saw you had Rackmasters out there debuting one of their new rubs. Happy to see that. Happy for them. Hope you guys had a good turnout for it. William, yeah, hard to go wrong with hot dogs on grill grates. I know it seems simple, but there's just something that charcoal and smoke does that. William, I love the cure on ribs. Did that a few weeks back. I like the cure on breakfast sausage and bacon. Yeah, breakfast sausage and bacon is dynamite with the cure. For any of you folks that are looking to make your own sausage and stuff like that, here's a couple tips for you, since we're talking pork and pork shoulders and everything today. So the super simple, easy way to do this is next time you're at the grocery store, buy some ground pork. You know, it's unseasoned, just ground pork. Buy a couple pounds of that. Season it with the cure. And if you like an herby, you know, if you like the herby breakfast sausages, get you some sage, some dried sage, and chop that up, and add the dried sage and a little bit of thyme to the ground pork. Just kind of hand mix that. Let it sit for about 20-30 minutes and take a pinch off, put it in a hot frying pan, fry the pinch up and taste it. And see if you like it, if it's seasoned well enough for you. If it's not, you can add more seasoning to it, mix it up. I encourage you to do it in small increments. But you do it, rest it. You don't have to rest it for 20 minutes the second time. 5-10 minutes to do. Take a pinch of the sausage out, put it in a frying pan, fry it up, taste it. I like to, my breakfast sausage recipe is ground pork, the cure, chopped, dried sage and thyme, and a little crushed red pepper flake. And then, I patty it out. I also stuff it. I got a nice little hand crank sausage stuffer. So we'll stuff it in some small sheep casings and tie it off, and we've got tons of breakfast sausage. So that breakfast sausage you're paying $5 a pound for when you can go buy ground pork for 99 cents. That's how you do it. Okay, buy your ground pork for 99 cents a pound, stock up on it, season it with the cure, some herbs, whatever rub you like. And then, if you're buying it in the tube at that, then all you gotta do is order a bag. They have the 1 pound bags for people that process their own meat. Buy the 1 pound bag, freezer bag. It's a cylinder. It's usually white with red checks on it. You can label what it is. Do that. You can twist it, tie it off, or use a hog casing to crimp it off. But that's the way you can fill the freezer with plenty of breakfast sausage on the cheap. Like 80% off. If you really want to get big into it, you buy some offcuts, debone them, and grind it yourself. All right, Alex, what's up with Portillo's? Portillo's is probably the best fast food joint in Chicago. Best burger, best dog, and good beef. Um, Tommy finished 25 pounds of pork sausage. I hope that was making it, Tommy, and not eating it, because if you ate it, you're going to have some problems later. But same thing, actually, while we're touching on that, making your own sausage like that, like brat burgers, Italian sausage, all that stuff that you're paying, $3.99 up to $6.99 for. Buy ground pork and season it. Good ground pork, Italian seasoning, salt and pepper, some crushed red pepper flake in it if you want it spicy. Now you have Italian sausage patties, or you can stuff it. If you're looking for the traditional bratwurst, you can do that. If you want a beer brat, you can buy beer powder, put in there, or you can just mix, cook down a beer, take a beer, reduce it by 2/3 so it's almost a syrup, and mix that syrup in with the meat. If you leave, that's a tip if you want beer flavored pork sausage, like if you want to make your own beer brats. Because if you leave the beer at full strength, full liquid, you're going to get a really runny, mealy brat. Okay, so if you want it to flavor like beer, you need to reduce the beer by at least 2/3 so it's almost a syrup. If you're using a light beer, do it over medium to medium high heat. You don't want a rolling boil. You just want a good steam coming off, because if you're rolling boil, you're going to toast or caramelize the malts and the sugars in your beer, and then you're going to change the flavor. So I would definitely give that a try. You can use one beer to season, 2 pounds of ground pork. So you can buy 2 pounds of ground pork, pick a beer, cook it down to, reduce the beer down to 1/3 in a saucepan, add some chopped onions, some chopped garlic, and here's the great thing. While KitchenAid mixer grinders aren't great for grinding meat from whole, they are great for processing meat that's ground. And people are like, well, why would you do that? Well, anytime you make sausage, you always mix in your spices and then you run it through the grinder again. So in this instance, you buy ground pork when it's cheap and on sale, and then you put your mixes in. So you put the reduced beer in, you put the garlic, you put the onion, the salt, the pepper, maybe a hint of sugar. You mix it in the bowl, you run it back through the grinder so it disperses everything. And then you can patty it up, or then you can put the stuffer attachment on. You can stuff it, or you can use a hand stuffer like I do. But all these are easy ways. Like, you don't have to grind your own meat. You can do the same thing. Ground beef, you want to make some beef sausages, you can buy ground beef. Another way to do it, it's not as clean, the texture's a little different, but if you're really hard up for it and you don't have a grinder but you have a good food processor, you can cube the meat up and you can run it in the food processor and chop it really fine that way. And that's also a good way if you're looking to make sausage, whether it be pork, beef, or venison. If you don't have a good grinder but you have a good food processor, that'll work. Let's see here. Caroline, you are welcome from the sausage tips. No butcher shops nearby. Where do you buy casings? So Caroline, I'll tell you, I order all my casings anymore off Amazon for the cost and the convenience. It's hard to beat it. But you don't need to go to a butcher shop most of the time. If you have a Tractor Supply Company, Rural King, Cabela's, Bass Pro, actually quite a few Academy Sports have them. But you can typically find, and some Walmarts do too, it just depends. If you go back in the sporting goods, where they typically keep like the kits for wild game and processing wild game and all that, typically you can find some casings there. Because they're going to be shelf stable, they're going to be in a vac bag, they're usually packed in salt. So another tip, if you've never done this before, get your casings out at least a day ahead of time. Okay, because your casings are going to be packed in salt, and you're going to need to soak your casings so that you can get them rehydrated, and then you can flush the extra salt out of there, or you're going to have a really bad time of it. So get your casings ahead of time. I just order mine off Amazon. They're relatively inexpensive. A little goes a long way. Depending on what you're casing, sheep casings are really good. They're small, so breakfast sausage and hot dogs. Pork casings are typically what you're going to be using for most sausages that you know of. So like your brats and stuff like that, that's typically going to be a pork casing. And then you can get beef casings, and the big beef casings, those are going to be like for summer sausage and those larger format slicing sausages. So that's kind of a little tip on the casings. Like I said, make sure you flush that out. I'll tell you a little pro tip there. If you have a sous vide wand, or if you're looking to buy one, make sure you buy one where you can run the circulator without the heat. A lot of people call this the wine. A lot of them are selling this and marketing as a wine chilling feature now, because you can put wine in a tub with ice and water and turn the circulator on. It'll circulate and chill the wine faster. But that circulator without the heat actually comes in handy quite a bit, because I actually like to use the circulator without the heat when I'm soaking my casings, because it keeps the water moving, and that movement of that water dissolves that salt. So it's going to pull that salt out of there easier than it just laying in a bowl of water. So that movement's going to help keep things churning and moving around, and it's going to get your casings soaked better, and it's going to remove more of that salt. And then I typically change the water in there at least twice. Dump it out and put fresh water in. Other things for your sausage making: colder the meat, the better. Like I said, you don't have to have a grinder. If you don't have a grinder, you can also use a heavy duty food processor. The other thing too, especially now in the age of all these power tools, the old school, crank hand grinder, where you literally like put it on the end of the counter, clamped it onto the counter, and then you hand ground the meat. In a pinch, I'll tell you right now, I've done it before, and you can certainly do it. You can take one of those, and you can take a cordless drill or even a cheap corded drill, take the handle off, and put the chuck on that thing, and one speed, in speed one, so you got the torque, you can grind some stuff. Now, it's going to take you a little while. It's not going to be the most fun experience, but you can do it if you're handy. The other thing you can do is you can slap a pulley on there and get you a motor. And I got a ton of buddies that grew up down in southern Illinois that they got this. They got the big old hand crank grinder head, and it's mounted at one end of a board or a plank. And they got an electric motor with a pulley on it mounted at the other, and they fit the grinder with the pulley. Then they go buy a lawnmower belt and string it between the two, and they got a grinder that cost them to put together about $75. That would probably cost $400 or $500 in the store, and all you got to worry about is replacing a belt every once in a while. So it doesn't have to look 100% pretty to get the job done. There's a saying: no one wants to watch them make the sausage. But that to me is a really big opportunity at home that you can get into. Like I said, you can buy ground pork already and just flavor it and package it the way you want, so you can stuff it. The other thing that's fantastic, especially not right now because ground beef's high, but when beef is cheap, when they have sales on ground beef, I like to buy the ground beef, season it up, and then I make my beef snack sticks, because then I can just season it up. I can stuff my snack stick casings and I can smoke those, and it's fantastic, and it doesn't take that long. And the other thing I'll tell you too is, especially making the snack sticks, frozen beef's better. If you buy frozen beef when it's on sale, when they're, even if it's pattied up, if the sale's good enough, as long as it's just straight beef, I like doing that. Because you want to emulsify that beef and you want to emulsify the texture anyways. So I find that ground beef that's been frozen, you thaw it, you mix it up, and then you extrude it into the casing, and it's fantastic, and it makes the best snack sticks. So there is how our pork steak, or our pork shoulder, then got to sausage, then got to snack sticks. Can you grind meat with an immersion grinder? Immersion blender, I think is what you meant. And you would have to have one hell of an immersion blender to grind meat with it. I would not suggest trying it. Caroline, you're welcome. Tim, thanks for joining us. Siri doesn't do Southern very well, does she, Steven? Alright, so let's do some quick housekeeping things, and then I'll let you guys get about your holiday weekend business. So, for those of you that don't know, our Father's Day packs went live Saturday. These are pre-order. They're going to ship out the week before Father's Day, so dad or grads. This is the dad or grad pack, so if you got a dad or a grad that's looking for something special, this is going to be a fantastic one. So dad or grads, the pack we have available is 1 pound of our brand new, yet to be released, Notorious Red. This is our red apple rib rub, pork rub, tons of flavor, great color, well balanced. Going to be a lot of fun to cook with. We're cooking with it tonight, actually. We're having a pork meatloaf with the Notorious Red in it. Second rub we're releasing is, we're doing a Flavor Anonymous Yeti cup. We're doing the Notorious Red. We have 2 special products, secret products, if you will. We're going to give you a pound of each of them. You're going to get them just as we get them from the factory once we've submitted our formula. And what's the other thing? Well, so we've got some secret things in there too that we can't tell you yet. We'll be releasing, but we got some coupons for some real retailers, online retailers. We have a gift from a very, small gift from our friends at one of our favorite charcoal companies. And Burger Bomb, you're right, Bill. I had a brain fart there for a minute. Burger Bomb and Notorious Red. So Burger Bomb, this is actually what we're, and I just used it, so I feel really bad. So we just made a pork meatloaf with Burger Bomb, Notorious Red, a little Annie up. We mixed all that in. Then we coated it with Double Down and put it in the oven. I know, we're ovening it, but we're expecting a storm, and I didn't want to get out in it. So you're going to get a pound of RED, which is $15. You're going to get a pound of Burger Bomb, which is also $15. You're going to get a custom Yeti Rambler, the 30-ounce Yeti like this, with the big logo across the cup, Flavor Anonymous, but they're going to be black cups, okay? So you're getting the black Yeti cup that retails for $40, but hey, it's custom logoed Flavor Anonymous. You're getting a pound of each of our rubs, so right there you'd be at $70. We're also giving you a pound each of 2 new products that aren't available, that aren't launching until July 4th weekend. So there's no way to get those. So they have immense value because no one else can get them. There's only going to be 100 bags of them because we're doing 100 Father's Day packs. And once they're gone, they're gone. In addition to all that, like I said, you're going to get a coupon to Fantastic Barbecue online retailer. You're going to get, some random gifts. They're giving us a big bag of fun that we're going to distribute to you guys from one of our favorite charcoal retailers, or charcoal brands. And we're working on some other stuff. So there's going to be a couple goodies in there for Dad or Grad. At $70, it's a hell of a deal. It's probably $15, $15 off. And we did that because coincidentally the shipping's $15. So a package that probably should have been $90, we did for $75. That way, by the time you add the shipping back in, it equals out. And we did that so that you can order whatever you like to go and enhance your Dad or Grad pack. You can go through the store. I'm picking up cutting boards tomorrow, so we'll have a limited number of cutting boards available. The cutting boards are pretty cool. We got 3 different sizes on them, so you'll see those tomorrow. Actually, probably see them Wednesday on the live. And we ordered some new hats. So we got a few things coming. So keep an eye on the store. If you haven't already, as I said, go grab your Dad or Grad. Our newest pack with Burger Bomb, Notorious RAD. You're going to love these rubs. Both of them are fantastic. Both of them are used for anything. Just like I said, it's a Burger Bomb. I didn't say beef. So pork burgers, beef burgers, chicken burgers, turkey burgers, salmon burgers, whatever. Use our inside out method, meaning season the ground beef while it's loose, mix it up in the bowl, patty it out, and then put whatever you want on the outside. I promise you're going to have a fantastic burger. But thanks again for joining me for Cigar Sundays. I hope you guys learned a little something. We covered a lot of stuff here. So we talked about pork shoulder. We talked about collar muscle, pork fillet, money muscle. We talked about, some of the how to make your own breakfast sausage, Italian sausage, snack sticks, all that good stuff. And, make sure you tune in on Wednesday, because if you didn't see the ad, the cigars and brown water to say goodbye to the weekend and hello to the week. On Wednesday, we are going to be talking with a new friend of ours that we hope to be very close with, and I hope to have a lot of fun with, over the next couple of years. A distiller and purveyor of fantastic brown water. So until Wednesday 7 o'clock, thank you guys for joining me here on Pitdaddy Cigar Sundays, the holiday edition. So anytime we have a Monday holidays, Cigar Sundays are going to happen on Mondays. I hope you guys had a great weekend. Please don't forget the reason for the holiday. This holiday, while it's a great reason to get in the pool and make drinks and have a beer, a cigar, some brown water, get the grill out. Typically it's the first launch of summer. But the reason is, some people gave some people gave all. So let's keep those folks in our thoughts and remember them, and remember the men and women who sacrificed themselves in the line of duty so that we could all drink the brown water, smoke the cigars, grill the burgers and hot dogs, and be here to do what we do. So, as always, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for joining me. Hope you guys have a great week. We'll see you Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. And can't wait. Talk to you then. Flavor Nation, we out.